Well, welcome everyone to our Tuesday Let's Chat. Tonight we have a special edition talking about communities and how we transition from where we are now going into where we want to be. We have the beautiful Artemiss K here, and I know Artemiss from pre-pandemic days. Known her as a coach, and she's exceptional at what she does. And I've invited her to come on tonight to help us navigate this world. And really, as we go forward, preparation is everything, but above and beyond that, it's about your mindset, and it's key to how we navigate these transitions as we hit them. It's really, for me, healing. So as the blurb that I put in before was a lot of healing needs to take place so that we can move forward without dragging the past with us as we go, as we can often do. So I want to turn the time over to Artemiss, and we'll have some questions for you at the end, Artemiss. But thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Kelly, I really appreciate you inviting me. And this really came out of that coffee you and I had. And, talking about all the nuances of the parallel society that we can be so excited about creating. So my passion is around personal development. And what the last 2 years has really shown me is how essential that is for countering what's going on globally and then creating this beautiful new earth, this clear space of love and connection and community that so many of us want to, even more actively than ever before, to be creating now. So my topic tonight is about personal development in creating the fabulous parallel societies that we all want. So what I'm going to start is, has anybody ever seen that movie called The Village? Because that is not what we want to create. In that movie, they create an artificial village because there's a fear about everything else that's going on, but they contain it on lies and fear. That's how they try and protect the people inside. But of course, it kind of turns the wrong way. And so that's not what we want. That is the opposite of what we want in these self-empowered and beautiful energy parallel societies. So part of what Kelly mentioned in the written introduction, which is really great, is that there is a lot of trauma happening right now. And that's one of the things we need to be really aware of moving in. So from what I've seen and experienced in my own circle of friends and myself, there's a couple of levels of trauma, if you want to call it that. A lot of what's happened in the past 2 years has seriously re-traumatized people who had very terrible childhoods and have repressed them, which for those who are ready and have the support has been a portal for their healing. And others are just, managing it the best they can. One of the things I say very boldly is you do not owe your healing to anybody on any timetable. The healing has to be self-driven, and it has to be done when you're ready, because it's never easy. It's always worthwhile, but it's never easy. So we can never do it for someone else or because we suddenly become aware of something. We have to consciously choose that path. So there's things that are being re-triggered because of what's happened in the last 2 years. Plus, there's a whole different level of trauma from the gaslighting and the constant, buzz of fear that has held for a solid 2 years. That's not what our nervous systems are made to, be able to handle. So even that has created like this constant imbalance in some of the most, usually balanced people. So it requires a lot more active effort from us to stay conscious, to stay grounded, to stay centered, to recognize when we're acting out of character because the stress is getting overwhelming again. And a lot of both of those are being driven by what is called shadow work, which is also very similar to, well, related to inner child work, because the triggers and the patterns and the coping mechanisms that are being activated even more than usual in the last 2 years, most of it overwhelmingly comes from our childhood, repressed emotions, unmet needs, and so on. So when we talk about personal development, bringing self-awareness and consciousness to how we're behaving, but also the thoughts, the intentions, the feelings behind the behavior, that's really essential. Because almost any of the actions, such as choosing to, live off-grid in a home that you make for yourself, or creating a parallel society, in a business in your field, either of those can come from fear and avoidance, or they can come from like an empowered, inspired space. So the action can look the same, but the energy that we bring with it, the intention that we bring with it, why we're even taking that step, that is where we get insight to ourselves about, am I coming from an empowered place of clear energy, or am I doing a knee-jerk fear reaction? And when anytime that we're making those choices from that fear knee-jerk reaction, those are the triggers, those are the coping mechanisms that we need to consciously heal and integrate, so we're not just duplicating that in the new parallel society. Okay, so what we don't want to do is take all of the patterns that have led us to this point and just put them into a new system. We want to take this opportunity to heal. So for me, it's almost like if you imagine a garden that's become filled with diseased plants and everything's kind of growing haphazard. Do you just yank out the plant and throw it into some substandard soil wherever it happens to land? Or do you take the time to enrich that new soil, figure out where the best placement for the plant is, gently remove it, nurse it back to health, and put it into a prime position? So we don't want to just transfer the toxicity and the chaos from one system into another. So when we talk about that kind of thing, one of the most obvious places to start to figure out, well, what is my own triggers here, or what's happening for me, is what's really obvious right now is all the things going wrong out there. Now, in no way am I saying that we let anybody off the hook for what they are accountable for. In no way do I say that we stop whatever activism we are drawn to whatever end. But parallel to that, in unison with that, we must look at, what does that say about us? What part of me enabled this to happen? Because when we can look at our politicians and say they're corrupt, they're doing this, they're doing that, I don't know. I can tell you that before 2020, I never cared about politics. I never learned who stood for what. So for me, I have to take that responsibility that I gave away that power. And what, it was too hard. It was not interesting enough. I didn't think I could make a difference. Whatever my story is, that is my responsibility to think, well, that is what I did. So my part in the fact that there's people in power that I don't agree with and who I don't feel has my best interests at heart is to go, well, what can I now do about it? How do I change that thing that I don't agree with? Or I've told Kelly this, I want to learn to grow carrots. I want to grow anything. I have such a brown thumb. So I'm so excited about the idea of like learning from her program with the gardens and, having working bees with friends. And because one of the things is I've been disconnected about where my food comes from. It's really easy to just walk down to the supermarket and get whatever, but I don't have any sense of the seasonability. I don't know, it's only recently that I've really looked into how things are grown and artificially ripened and et cetera, et cetera. So again, it goes back to convenience and me giving up my power because somebody else is just going to suddenly magically make the food appear for me. So again, it doesn't mean all of us want to become farmers, but for me to recognize that by taking certain steps and making choices, I have abdicated my power. I have given responsibility for my well-being to someone else, rather than consciously saying, I like how they grow their food. I respect the company values. This is where I actually want my money to speak into. So this is how we start looking at all the things out there, and then use it as an opportunity to go, well, how did I enable that? How did I contribute to that? Because look, I mean, there's many times that people, really good people, make business decisions that aren't really grounded in their ethics, because that's just how business is done. Or we parent through manipulation or guilt because everyone does it. Well, haven't we heard those two phrases used in the most manipulated ways in the last 2 years? Everyone does it, and that's just how business is done. It doesn't wash anymore. It should have never washed, but it washes even less now. So again, if I'm making this choice in the relationship with my child, in how I run my business, in how I support my community, in freedom activities, it all comes back to my responsibility to make the choices. And when we recognize that we are not making conscious choice, but we're working from that kind of automatic knee-jerk reaction, that's when we can start bringing in awareness to the triggers and patterns and coping mechanisms. That's the things that are grounded in our unmet childhood needs or the trauma. And the first step with that is we have to release the shame and the guilt. Because at any point, when we were developing a coping mechanism as a child or a pattern as a teenager and, reacting in the moment as an adult, that was the most conscious we were. That was the best option we could take at the time. But then we find ourselves as these adults willing to stand in our power, willing to own our responsibility, willing to bring consciousness into everything we choose. And then we can look at each behavior and say, does that serve me? I choose it. This doesn't serve me. It goes against my values, or doesn't lead to what I think is important in the world. So what do I do about that now? And that's how we bring in the consciousness, so we can actually start, cleaning out the mold, cleaning out the toxicity, cleaning out the rot. I work with I'm blessed to work with a lot of people in the freedom advocacy space. And a couple of the things that I call to attention, and I'll put my hand up as a recovering people pleaser, I know these well, but this is what we really need to be conscious of. So what seems to be common patterns for people who are active in the freedom advocacy is self-reliance, anything that we're trying to leave the matrix and create something new and beautiful. Some of the patterns that we can find ourselves in. People pleaser. When we say yes, when we want to, or no, we should say no, because we're afraid of letting somebody down. We're afraid of what that person might think of us. The martyr. It's up to me to save everybody, even when I'm the one falling apart because I haven't made enough space for myself. The savior. If I don't do it, they're all going to, fall apart. I must be the one who, gives the information, fixes the problem, does that. The peacekeeper, which we kind of just agree with people just to get along. And one that has come out a lot more in this division that a lot of our government is trying to create pitting us against each other, is needing to make someone else wrong in order for us to be able to stand in our truth, which differs to theirs. So all of those can come from a good place of us genuinely caring for someone and wanting to make a positive contribution. But in their most basic way that they show up, they come out of our shadow, they come out of a trigger, they come out of a place of, I have to control and manipulate things. And that manipulation always comes from fear of loss of control. So what happens is when I fear that if you don't do this, and so I'm kind of being all hard and heavy and trying to have power over you, however good my intentions, what it's actually doing is coming from my place of fear that if you don't do this, something's going to happen to me. So effectively, I'm holding you responsible for what's happening to me. Now, again, please separate this from the fact that we hold people who are accountable for their actions as we move to correct things. This is about my inner awareness. So I know for me, I even had a conversation with a friend of mine about it this morning. When I am not grounded and centered and rested enough so that I start coming from that kind of knee-jerk reaction place, suddenly the world feels really heavy. And I tend to be very short-tempered with people who aren't doing the right thing. Like, why aren't you pushing for enough freedom? Why aren't you standing up for the truth? Why aren't you doing all this? And I realize that, you know, I'm pointing the finger out there, but it's really four fingers pointing back at me, because I'm not doing enough of what inspires me to make a difference. So that's part of how we can start to look at where are we coming from a trigger or reaction compared to when are we coming from that clear energy of making a choice that's right for us and serves our community. Because one of the things we always have to balance is I am responsible for myself. So when I work with my clients, we call it fierce self-responsibility. So I love myself to be honest with myself about my crap. And then I take responsibility for healing that, integrating that. But then we want to balance that with community, because none of us are an island. You know, people become much more the sum of their parts when they work in a dynamic relationship with one to others, community, exactly what's happening in this space with sharing information. So there's always the balance of I'm responsible for me, but I want to contribute to the community as well, and how that can interrelate to each other. So in terms of recognizing where something is a natural response, you know, you can have a response, however strong it is, but it's to the stimulus in that moment, versus a trigger or reaction is something that we have a story around. So just some quick steps of how you can actually bring in the self-awareness so that you can start looking at what beliefs and patterns serve you and what don't. First thing, you release your self-judgment, because while the judgment is there, we're at battle within ourselves, and that's a really uncomfortable place to be, and there is no space for healing. So once we release the judgment, we bring in observation and compassion, understanding that we made those choices at a time when we didn't feel that we had another opportunity or a better option. And then through observation with compassion, you start listening to your words. You listen to the words you use when you're disagreeing with a politician, when you see someone doing something that you go, I can't believe. You know, one of the things that's getting a lot of reaction right now is when you see kids in masks. You know, that's one thing that seems to trigger people. And I'm not saying it's a right or wrong thing. I'm saying listen to your words and pay attention to the emotions that come up for you when you see something you disagree with. And then look at what's behind the emotion. Is it the balanced response to what's happening in the moment? Or is it like a big trigger, like it's got a backstory and it's something that you ruminate over and you start, you know, thinking, oh, they probably think this and there. So you start making a story about all the characters in this little play that you created. That's not an actual balanced response. Okay, that's a hint that there's a trigger at play here. And then once you recognize a trigger, then you start exploring the belief about yourself or others that drives this. So for example, as I mentioned, I observed with myself that often what's behind my anger is the lack of belief that I can protect me and my kids. So it's like I hold somebody else responsible. So I have to come back and go, well, that's me giving my power away. So if I'm feeling at, you know, dis-ease right now about how to protect myself and my family, what can I do? What is something I can actually affect in this moment? And when I bring my attention and my action back to that, then I can go back to my center and go, well, what was that huge reaction? Okay, I'm feeling out of balance. I've been pushing too hard. I'm feeling maybe a bit disconnected to my kids, so I need to spend more time with them. You know, and that's where you then start exploring what is the better option for you, because it's going to look very different for everybody. And then once you start looking into that and you start recognizing patterns, you can then also look into how to heal and integrate that for yourself. Is there like a ritual you need in your life to help you decompress after your hard days? Are there ways that you can self-soothe before you kind of get to that point of reaction? Do you need to actively get more support, or any, myriad of options there? But the first thing is to bring in the awareness with compassion to yourself, notice the patterns, and then start thinking what's behind that. And then as you make those active choices, this beautiful self-reliance and off-grid communities, or whatever speaks to you, whatever your heart feels inspired to do, it's going to come from a clear energy. It's going to come from a place of creation rather than reaction. So that, in a nutshell, is what the personal development fits into the creating these new communities.
Brilliant. I love that. I took lots of notes. I hope everyone else is taking lots of notes too, because you said so many gold gems in there, and I just want to touch on a few, because personal development work is everything, and I think people need to be at work on this daily. It's not something that you can just switch on like a light. It needs daily application. So what you started to say, once you notice the patterns, and then you can start to decompress and things, and because when you can coach yourself if you've been trained or have been practicing this for a while. So if you're untrained and this is all very new, what's the best place for people to really start?
Okay. So the very first step in this that you can't go past is bringing in the self-awareness. Even if it's like going, oh, last week I had this interaction, and now that there's been enough space, I can see, well, my reaction was a little bit over the top. So you start, it doesn't matter how far back the event was. When you kind of think back over the last day, 2, 3, a week, find something that you can allow yourself to acknowledge was not, a balanced response to the moment. And then bring in that conversation. I wonder what was happening for me. So again, you really have to hold compassion for yourself, because if you start going into the, I can't believe I reacted like that, and oh my goodness, what's wrong with me? If you start that conversation, then you're going to shut yourself down. And there's no room for vulnerability, which is where this comes through. So however far back the situation is, you start that conversation of, okay, I could recognize that was out of balance for me. I wonder what was going on for me. And then you start, and you can even start to see the pattern, go, oh, when I'm really tired, that's when I tend to snap. Okay. And then when I snap, what is it about? It's about protecting my kids. Okay. So what we're aiming to do is we're closing the gap between when an event happens and our awareness around it. And when you do that with that conscious thing, and as I said, it could be something that happened a couple of weeks ago, a month ago, and then you start bringing it in, and then you go, oh, that thing was 2 days ago. And then you're bringing it in, because what happens, it's almost like an interwoven, that the more you heal, the more compassion you can hold for yourself. And the more compassion you can hold for yourself, the more you'll be vulnerable with yourself. And then therefore more honest information can come through. So what you're working towards is doing it in the moment. Sometimes I open my mouth and I go, that's not centered me. And then I just got to take a breath and go, okay, what's going on for me in the moment? So the aim is to get to the point where it becomes a part of how we think. But you're right, Kelly, this isn't something you switch on and suddenly you're there. It's a step at a time. But the beauty of it is every step brings its own awareness. It's not like there's nothing, and suddenly you're aware. You kind of, you build it. Every step just leads on from the next one. So the first thing is just to give yourself permission to think back on something that you feel was out of balance for you, and then start that inner dialogue. Now, what I strongly recommend is that when you're doing that dialogue, you either preferably journal it or if you prefer, talk it into like an audio thing. And it's not that anybody else is ever going to listen or hear it if you don't want them to. But when we think thoughts, especially based on emotions, they stay very vague when they're in the head. But for us to be able to articulate it means we need to organize our thoughts enough to get out the words. And in organizing our thoughts is when we'll go, oh, I've had that thought before. Oh, here's that pattern again that I'm recognizing now, right? So we need to get it out of the head and into something that we can observe about ourselves.
I love that. I love that because it's really, being the third party, isn't it? And just observing without judgment, without blame. It's just, oh, look at that, like a tennis match. And like, okay, that happened, and then and seeing it objectively and going, okay, where else do I do that? Where?
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. I did that with Auntie Jan, and I did that with I've done that a few times in my life.
Yes.
And I think that's really great because the more we look back on that and we do see patterns, we go, okay, we're still learning how to respond in that, and that's why it keeps coming up again, so that we can learn from it.
Yeah. Can I make 2 comments also? The triggers that we have held the longest, the patterns we've had held the longest, they are often the hardest to see and recognize because they're so ingrained, right? So be willing just to work on whatever you notice now. And also, whoever we are the same person at work, business, friendship, spouse, children, right? But there will be areas of our life where the pattern sticks out much more obviously. But when you heal it in one area, it will, echo into all the other ones and heal that as well. So what is it? I read a quote once that, God takes you by the handle that sticks out. So wherever the trigger is presenting with itself, be willing to work with that because it will echo into every part of your life.
Yeah, brilliant. So I guess, if things are going well and working well, you don't have to worry about that area. It's those areas that are things that are not working so well. You go, okay, that's the handle that's sticking out. I can, grab onto that one and start working with that.
Here's the gem, Kelly, because you made a good point. When things are going right, that's actually a really great time to figure out why things are going right. Right? Because if things are going right because I'm taking time, I'm connecting with people who inspire me, I'm doing genuine self-care, then me being aware of why things are going right is going to be really useful when I'm trying to figure out why things aren't going right. I had a client who, kept messaging me and going, do I need to, talk to you today because everything's really good? I said, actually, when everything is really good is the perfect time, because when she was having an episode, we were only dealing with the episode. But when everything's okay is when we can actually look at why do the episodes kick in. So in the same way, when we're working with ourselves, I know, a lot of us tend to only do the journaling and the heavy work when we're really distraught. If we can kind of bring in that opportunity to also do self-connecting and journaling when things are good, then you can actually bring that awareness as well, because that's a gift. Wow, I'm feeling really good today. What's going on for me there?
That's awesome. And, if you're like me, I'm very self-critical and barely take the time to acknowledge myself and give yourself a pat on the back. But that's a must. We got to reward ourselves for things that we're doing well. So yeah, brilliant. I've really enjoyed tonight, and I just want to ask anyone maybe you can type in if you've got a question, type it in the chat. We've got a lot of people on tonight who wanted to hear what you had to say, and you've just hit the nail on the head with so many things. So I want to just go back to my notes, balancing the responsibility with the community, so many good things. Does anyone want to ask a question? I just, Yeah, just type in the chat if you want to ask a question. So if there's many of you, or everyone's just happy to listen in. Do you have I know examples always good, or you said journaling is a really good way, or I love that talking into a recording. I really love meditation, for being able to kind of just observe the thoughts, observe and take that time where, you know, and I never used to be a meditator and avoid it like the plague, but now I love it. It's that superhero superpower. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask? Anyone have a situation that you're dealing with that you're a bit stuck with, maybe? We might have a conversation once we hit stop on the record. So yeah, everyone's happy to listen in. So good. Yeah. It's such an important thing though that that you're talking about, Artemiss. There's not one person on the planet who isn't dealing with something, right? And so the more spiritually aware, emotionally intelligent that we can be around, you know, who we are and get to know ourselves first, then we can connect with others in a much deeper way. And like you say, make choices based on, because that's our inner most core desire, not because it's a fear-based reaction. And I think that's really got to be clear as we're going forward, that yes, there's lots of things going on that would have us run in different directions at the moment, but when we are still and take the moment to you know, be self-aware, there's still lots of options.
I can share one way that when we're trying to decide, you know, sometimes when we're exploring new space, so when we're doing the inward journeying and communicating with ourselves, if you get stuck on the I don't know, that is a mechanism for protection, because I don't want to be wrong. Okay, so anytime when you're doing journaling or talking to yourself and you get stuck on the I don't know, just ask yourself, what would I say if I did know? What if I had to guess? Or if your thing is, oh, I don't know if this is real or if I'm just imagining it. Imagination is closer to our intuition than logic. Okay, and the stories that we weave to justify our triggers come out of the mind. So what we want to do is just give the mind a break and drop into the heart, because the heart always knows. So when you're trying to figure out, is something coming from a clear energy or is something like a triggered response, pay attention to your body. Like take a couple of deep breaths, relax your belly muscles, your shoulders, your mouth and your forehead, because that's where we clench the tightness. Once you have that really relaxed body, then hold the thought. And if you notice that you start scrunching in, then that is your body saying no, or that this is not okay. But if you hold the thought and your body can stay relaxed and expansive, that is a yes. Because we can, like on this journey, there's going to be things that are going to be uncomfortable, but they still excite and inspire us the right way. So this isn't about avoiding discomfort, because that's where we grow, but it's about learning when is something out of alignment because it's not my path, or I'm choosing it from fear, compared to, wow, that excites me, even if I'm a little bit nervous and uncomfortable. So paying attention to what happens in your body when you're having those conversations with yourself is one of the ways to go, which way am I sitting? Because as we said, like the choices can often look the same. They can look good to others. Oh, look at how much she's giving to everybody else. Look at all the projects. You know, like, as I said, I'm a recovering people pleaser. So to other people, I just looked like I was so devoted, and I was, but it was at cost to me. You know, I was burned out. I was not present to my kids. I was saying yes to too many things for all the wrong reasons. It wasn't until I got honest with myself about why I was doing that, that I could even get to the point of figuring out what is the right thing for me to say yes to, and can I deal with the rejection when I say no to things. So using your body and the response of stress or relaxation is one of the ways that we can start that conversation as well.
Oh, brilliant. I love that. So Artemiss, tell us, how can people connect with you? Are you still coaching? Are you because you're running stand in the park now? Tell us more about what you're up to.
Okay, I am definitely coaching. I will never stop coaching. I love this work. It's my playground. It's my work. It's my favorite topic. One of the things I like, my tagline in my business is, you're the only guru you need, because I don't have any answers for you. I'm a very powerful container holder. So I hold the space for people to feel safe so they can unpack all their stuff and then look at it for the first time and with clear eyes and understanding and compassion. And, and I ask questions and I make suggestions, but everybody is on a very individual journey because they have to find their truth for themselves. If they just take on what I say, it's not their truth. And I don't want people to take on what I say. I don't have the answers for them. Everybody needs to be willing to do that for themselves. And that's where you truly come up with something that, you can hold on to and as your truth, because it's come from the most inner part of you. And then you learn how to reconnect with that. Because as you said, this is a never ending journey. There's no end to this. You don't suddenly get to be finished okay, right? You get better at it. It gets less traumatic. You catch yourself in the moment and do whatever you need to self-soothe much faster. But, this is the human experience we've chosen. So there's always going to be interesting things. So that's what for my coaching, I do that. In the freedom advocacy space, I hold the Stand in the Park in North Kellyville every Sunday. I have a Facebook group for freedom kids and teens, because whether kids are homeschooling or still at school, we want them to have an opportunity to meet other kids from like-minded families, so that, often our kids are the only non-vaccinated in their group of friends. And that's fine. This is never about letting go of those friends, but it's about having options. So if something happens, because a lot of kids have been not included to parties or kicked out of choir or other sporting activities, we don't want the kids to feel caught. We want them to have an opportunity to build community like we do. I also have a Telegram channel called What the Actual, where I do some interesting conversations about anything down the rabbit hole. I am very proud tinfoil hatter. We used to call it conspiracy theories. Now we're just conspiracy realists.
And I watch your videos too, Artemiss, and they're brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant. So I encourage everyone to go onto What the Actual and learn something. I did.
Thanks, Kelly. So so I'm on all the socials. I'm always happy to engage with people and make connections with people in the self-reliant and, self-empowerment space. I think there's a lot of us, and connection and community is everything. I am very much a community-focused grassroots person. And my passion is personal development, because it's what brought me out of my years and years of living in the depressive abyss. So I had depression, down an abyss for far too long. So that's why I do what I do, and I love what I do.
So just before I make my next statement, Artemiss, there's a question from Elizabeth saying, how long have you been a clarity coach?
So Claire, I started officially coaching about 5 years ago. But it's like one of those things is, what is it that your friends have always been coming to you for?
Yeah.
So I think I've been doing personal development and spiritual growth stuff since my late teens. Yeah. I'm now 51, so I don't know, count that up, 30 something years, almost here. Yeah. But as far as actual coaching, about 5 years.
So just to let everyone know, because you and I speak a lot of the same language, we are, have similar values, and there's things that are important to us. We're kind of on the same ballpark with a lot of things that we're into. So I've actually asked Artemiss to join me in my self-reliance to work on some projects together. So we kind of don't even know what that looks like yet. We're just kind of exploring, but we just know that we're kind of neighbors. We're just up the road from each other, and we just have a passion for helping people flourish and in all these beautiful ways of being self-reliant and getting to know yourself first, which is the most important way to heal. So I look forward to doing more with you, Artemiss, and whatever fun stuff that we can come up with, we'll do it.
Kelly, yes, it's just I love your energy. It's like we're just going to create something awesome together. Who knows what that looks like, but it's just awesome.
Exactly. So yeah, join us for the ride. So we are going to go into our breakout rooms and have a chat now. So if you're here in the room with us, that's what we're going to do. And if you're watching the replay, thank you for watching, and do come back and join us next Tuesday when we have Ian from the Gourmet Garden School joining us and learn all about how we can grow our own veggies and make yummy food with them. So thank you for watching, and thank you so much, Artemiss, for your inspiration, your heart. Your heart is so deep, and we just really appreciate what you've shared with us tonight. We just all with some golden nuggets there. So I hope everyone's taking notes. So